may bring the jury in. All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Officer Wall.
Afternoon.
Now, it was June 29th when you responded to the Vance Street residence, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And your best recollection is it was somewhere around 1 a.m., is that right?
Yes, sir. It was approximately 1 a.m., which means it's give or take a minute or two.
Okay. And at that time, you indicated on direct that the only information that you had was there had been a fatality and you were going to investigate a party, is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's the only information I got.
And so was it your assumption that there was underage drinking or impaired driving going on when you went to go investigate?
The only thing on my mind was going to go investigate a party. I had no idea what was going on.
And so you, at that point, hadn't received any information regarding the fatality being alcohol related?
I don't recall if it was. I don't recall if that information was passed on to me.
Okay. And so when you arrived at the residence, and you're not equipped with any kind of recording equipment when you have an interaction like this with folks, are you?
No, I have a camera and microphone in my car, but I didn't have the microphone on inside the residence.
Okay. And you approached the residence, you said it was mostly dark, but there were a couple lights on. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you initially approached the front door. Could you tell where in the house the lights were on?
I couldn't tell exactly where they were on. I could tell that there was some kind of like a backlight inside the house. I can't tell you which light it was or which room it was coming from. Perhaps a night light or some kind of a dim light.
And so you made your way to the left around the edge of the house, and at that time you were equipped with a flashlight, correct?
I do have a flashlight on me,
Okay.
yes.
Did you shine your flashlight into the house?
I shined it in the house multiple times. I don't remember exactly which places I did because I kind of took it off my belt, shined it, put it back on my belt.
And did you do that along the front of the house before you moved to the side of the house?
I believe in the front of the house, I just took the flashlight out and kind of shined it through the front door area.
And then once you found the door on the side, were there any cars parked in the driveway that you could see?
I don't recall any cars parked in the driveway. I believe there's cars parked in the garage.
How long do you think it was before Ms. Matthews came to the door once you got to the side door?
Probably 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. And had you started to sort of give up and walk away at the time that she came to the door? Or were you still actively trying to get someone's attention?
Well, I never have it in my head to give up. I was still trying to locate somebody. Still trying to make contact.
Okay, so what were you actively doing at that time? I mean, when she came to the door, were you right at the door, or where were you?
When she came to the door, that was after I had seen somebody in the kitchen. And I went back to the door to knock on it some more. At that point, I took my flashlight, shined it up to the second level where there was either an oval shape or a circle shaped window, I can't remember. And then there was Miss Matthews was looking out the window at me.
And at that time, did you create a report that was as a result of this incident?
I did a supplemental report to the traffic fatality.
Okay. And that the report was a description of your observations with the Matthews and your involvement in the case, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you have that report with you?
I do. I have it right here.
Okay. And did you use that to refresh your recollection when you were testifying earlier?
I did.
Okay. In looking at your report, you indicated that you had observed what appeared to be a female. Is that reflected in your report in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay. And is it anywhere reflected in your report that you observed long hair?
It is not reflected in the report.
So is that something you remembered today, or?
No, that's something that I knew then, and that's why I determined that it was a female.
But that detail wasn't listed in your report?
No.
Okay. And it was dark in the kitchen, right?
It was, for the most part, yes, it was dark.
Okay. Now, at the time Kim Matthews came to the door, you were not aware that she had had a phone call with Carrie Taylor, were you?
I was not aware of any phone calls being made.
Okay. But when she approached, shortly after that, Chip Matthews came and he was saying, "Oh my God, JT is dead."
If that's Dr. Matthews, then yes.
Is that what Dr. Matthews said?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated when he said that, you didn't know what he was talking about, right?
Yes.
Well, that wasn't exactly true, was it?
Well, it was true in the fact that I didn't know anybody's name.
But you didn't acknowledge that you knew anyone had died, right?
Yes, I didn't acknowledge that.
Okay. Why didn't you acknowledge that?
Because I was sent there to investigate a party, and I didn't want to contaminate that investigation with anything else. I like to do one investigation at a time.
Okay. Well, when you told Ms. Matthews that you were there for a noise complaint, that wasn't exactly true either, was it?
No.
So why were you not being forthcoming with them at that time?
Because I was told to go investigate a party, so I just said that there was a noise complaint.
And turning your attention back to your report, where in your report did you indicate that the Matthews were being nonchalant?
I didn't indicate that in my report. That's just what I recall.
Now, when you went back to your vehicle after interaction with them, you saw that there was a 911 call, correct?
Yes.
And that call went out as an overdose request for medical assistance, correct?
Yes.
It was not a request for police assistance, correct?
A standard operating procedure in Raleigh is that anytime there's an overdose, EMS and fire go out, and Raleigh police get dispatched out as well.
Well, as support. But the call itself was not a call for police assistance, correct?
The call, I don't know what they requested on the 911 tape. All I know is that the dispatchers put in a request for police.
Well, didn't you testify on the rec that it was an overdose call?
Yes, it comes out as an overdose. Okay. That's just the call classification.
And when you indicated when you saw Ms. Ergish down in the basement that she seemed visibly intoxicated, was she laying in the bed when you saw her?
I don't exactly recall. I believe she was laying in the bed.
Okay. Was she under the covers or on top of the covers?
I don't recall if she had covers on top of her or she was laying on top of the covers.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just briefly, Officer Wall, in speaking with the Matthews there at the residence, as part of when you get a statement from someone or respond to a residence for this type of incident, do you get the age of each individual?
Yes, and that I get the date of birth.
Date of birth, yes. And when speaking with Kimberly Matthews, did you obtain her date of birth?
I did.
Is it listed there in your report?
It is.
What is Kimberly Matthews' date of birth?
Her date of birth is 7/26/1962.
And according to your report, that would have made her 51 years of age at the time.
Yes.
And when you spoke with Dr. Charles Matthews, how old was, what date of birth did he give you?
2/3/1955.
And how old would that have made Dr. Matthews?
59.
Thank you, Officer Wall. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Re-cross-examination.
No, thank you.
You may step down, sir. Please call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time the state will call Mr. Kenneth Walters to the stand.
Sir, if you would please place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Walters, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Kenneth Walters.
And Mr. Walters, how are you employed?
I am a paramedic with Wake County EMS.
How long have you been a paramedic with Wake County EMS?
With Wake County, 3 years. Been a paramedic 20 years.
You've been a paramedic
Yes,
for 20 years. The other 17 years, where were you employed?
Harnett County and Cumberland County.
While you've been with, or as a Wake County paramedic, kind of tell us a little bit about what your duties and responsibilities are, sir.
It depends on the situation. Daily we come in, check off our truck, make sure it's ready for response, and we respond to various calls throughout the county.
And when you respond to calls, I think you respond to all types of different situations.
Yes, sir.
Specifically in regards to alcohol situations, where someone is intoxicated, have you responded in those type of situations before?
Oh, yes, sir.
Approximately how many times have you responded to those type of situations?
I can't count, sir.
Probably in the thousands.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Walters, I want to turn your attention to the date of June 29th of 2014. On that date, sir, were you on duty and employed as a paramedic with Wake County EMS?
Yes, sir.
And who were you working with that day, Mr. Walters?
Corey Flanders.
Mr. Flanders?
Yes.
Mr. Flanders, when you work for Wake County EMS, you said you have a truck. Tell us a little bit about how you and a partner will respond to calls that night and what your different responsibilities are.
Well, at the time, he was an EMT and I was the paramedic, so I'm responsible for overall patient care.
What's the difference between an EMT and paramedic?
He has basic training, and me as a paramedic, I can do advanced life support things, like start IVs, give medications, defibrillate, advanced airways, things like that.
And I apologize, I interrupted you. What else? What were you and Mr. Flanders doing that night?
I don't recall. Our area was Fuquay. So to my best recollection, we were leaving one of the hospitals, and when we get dispatched to Wake County, it's just the closest ambulance when the call comes out. So we were tagged for that call.
And you said you were tagged for a call. Do you recall responding to 904 Vance Street?
Yes.
Here in Raleigh, North Carolina. What time did you receive the dispatch for that call, Mr.
I believe it was around 1:30. The times are listed on our call report.
And have you had the opportunity to review the call report prior to court today?
Yes, sir, I have.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Walters, I'm handing you what has been identified as State's Exhibit 49. If you'll take a look at this document, tell me if you recognize what this document is.
Yes, sir, I do. That's our call report from that night.
And does that call report indicate the events of that night, your treatment, and the treatment that Mr. Flanders did also?
Yes, sir, it does.
And Mr. Walters, you said you've had the opportunity to review this document prior to court. Does it fairly and accurately reflect your actions?
Yes, sir.
Did you actually write that report, or did Mr. Flanders?
Mr. Flanders did.
But you've reviewed it, and it appears to be true and accurate?
Yes, sir.
Any changes or alterations to that document?
No, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask to introduce State's Exhibit 49 into evidence.
State's Exhibit 49 is admitted into evidence.
In referring to that document, Mr. Walters, does that document indicate what time you were dispatched to the Vance Street residence?
Yes, sir, it does. We were dispatched at 0120.
So that's 1:20 in the a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And does it reflect what time you arrived there at Vance?
We arrived on scene at 0122.
And when you arrived there on scene, who was present?
We arrived to the front of the residence. I don't remember exactly what the events were that led us around to the back of the house. And when we arrived to the back of the house, we knocked on the door, waited probably 1 minute or so, and Mr. Matthews answered.
Well, before you went up to the front door, did you notice if there were any other law enforcement vehicles there or other?
I did not.
Okay, you did not notice.
No.
You went to the front door, and approximately how long did you say you stayed there?
It was the back that we went to.
But did you go to the front?
It was dark, and it appeared there was lights on toward the back of the house.
And when you say the back door, was that a side door or at the very rear of the residence?
I believe it was the very rear.
And Dr. Matthews opened the door at that point?
Yes.
Tell us about your conversation you had there with him when he opened the door.
He opened the door. I introduced myself as I do to every patient I encounter. He introduced himself. We asked what was going on, why we were called. And then Mrs. Matthews came in, I believe, and then the son came in. And then we were led down to the basement.
What did Dr. and Mrs. Matthews tell you about why you were called?
That we were there to see someone that was intoxicated, had been drinking.
Did they tell you who that individual was at that time?
They mentioned her name.
What was her name?
It was Miss English, Mary English.
Or Ergish?
Ergish, I'm sorry.
E-R-G-I-S-H.
G-I-S-H, yes.
And did they indicate to you at that time where Miss Ergish had been drinking, how she'd been drinking, anything to that extent?
No, not at that time. They did not.
How did the Matthews appear in terms of their level of concern when you showed up there at the door, Mr. Walters?
Casual.
What do you mean by that?
No sense of urgency. Just kind of like everyday thing.
What was, you said Thomas Matthews was there. What was his demeanor like at that point?
Annoyed. Just kind of like, what are they doing here?
And did you tell them why you were there at that point?
Yes, because we had received a 911 call.
Where did the Matthews take you at that point?
Down into the basement.
How did you get into that basement, Mr. Walters, if you recall?
I really don't.
You remember what rooms in the house you walked
No.
through? When you got into the basement, what did you see, sir?
I saw Miss Ergish laying on the bed. She was on her side. I believe it was her right side.
Or was she clothed at that time?
Yes.
Do you recall or have noted what she was wearing?
No.
You said she was in a bed. Do you recall if she was under a blanket, sheets, anything?
I don't recall.
How did you proceed to treat Miss Ergish there?
We called her name. There wasn't a response. So I did a sternum rub, which is where you take your knuckles of your finger and you rub someone's chest to wake them up.
How long did you have to do that?
Probably 3 or 4 seconds.
In a sternum rub, is that when do you find yourself needing to use that technique?
Usually if you shake them and don't immediately respond, or you call their name and they don't respond, that's the method that we use.
And did Miss Ergish eventually regain
Yes, sir.
consciousness?
Yes, sir.
What happened at that point?
We started evaluating her, and then Officer Wall was there. And we decided to take her out to the ambulance to continue our evaluation.
Why did you feel a need to do that, Mr. Walters?
Sometimes you just get a sense that, nothing was said, but the environment you don't feel comfortable in.
Why did you not feel comfortable in that environment?
No particular reason. I guess it was just kind of the air, the atmosphere. And, out there in the ambulance, that's my atmosphere, and we're more comfortable. And sometimes patients will tell you things then, or they'll talk to you that they won't say in front of other people.
The Matthews, during this point where you decided that you needed to go take Miss Ergish to the ambulance, what were they doing, saying at that point, sir?
I don't recall specific conversation.
Were they the source of you being uncomfortable?
Yeah, it was kind of the family trio, just kind of give a sense that we had to call, but we really don't want you here. And those words were never said.
Wait just a minute. Life strike is allowed. Disregard this witness's conclusion as to the purpose of the call or the response of the defendants to this call.
Mr. Walters, you mentioned earlier that that you had a conversation with the Matthews about Miss Urgish and what she'd been doing that night. Did
Yes.
that occur in the basement or upstairs?
It was mentioned upstairs in the basement. We had further conversation on that.
Tell us what the Matthews told you about, specifically Dr. Matthews and Mrs. Matthews, about what Miss Urgish had been doing that night.
They said she'd been drinking. I asked if she'd been at a party, and they said yes.
They tell you where that party was?
No, sir.
Did they tell you what type of party that was?
No, sir, they did not.
And was it Dr. Matthews or Mrs. Matthews that told you that?
I don't recall exactly, sir.
Dr. Matthews, did he identify himself to you as a doctor?
Yes, sir. Initially, when we introduced myself, he did.
How many times did he identify himself to you as a doctor?
Then, and he didn't mention it again in the basement.
In talking with him being a physician, did you ask him kind of what other symptoms she was having, what was going on with Miss Urgish?
No, sir.
What happened at that point, Mr. Walters?
We went out to the ambulance. I don't recall directly whether we assisted her or we put her on the stretcher. That was not documented in Mr. Flander's report. So I don't recall that directly. We were out at the ambulance and we were talking with her, and we established what we call capacity. Yes, she was intoxicated, but she knew what was going on. She was more easily aroused at that time. And she was able to answer our questions appropriately, and she stated she did not want to go to the hospital.
When someone refuses transport like that in that situation, what did you elect to do?
Well, she was 18, so she was able to make her own medical decisions. However, with her being as intoxicated as she appeared to be, we let to call her parents. We were able to get in touch with her mother, and her mother stated that the father would come and pick her up.
Were you going to leave Miss Urgish there at that residence in that condition?
No, we were not.
Why not?
And just felt better if there was more supervision, because she was, like I said, even though she was legal to make her own decisions, she was underage and intoxicated.
When you made the decision you weren't going to leave her there and you understood the father was on her way, what did you do at that point?
We discussed it with the RPD officers on scene, and we decided that we would leave her in their custody until a parent arrived.
And that was Officer Wall that
Yes.
was here.
Yes, sir.
So you left Miss Urgish in Officer Wall's custody.
Yes, sir.
While you were outside treating Miss Urgish, did you have any other conversation with the Matthews family?
Not that I recall.
Where were they while Miss Urgish was outside?
I don't know exactly. I mean, they weren't out of the ambulance, so I don't know where they were at that time.
Did they ever come out and offer any other information to you about what was going on with Miss Urgish?
I don't recall, sir.
If I may have just a moment, Charles.
Yes, you may.
In your evaluation, both with in speaking with Miss Urgish and speaking with the Matthews, were you able to tell what the impaired substance was?
Speaking with Miss Urgish, she did tell us that she had been drinking liquor. She never specified what type.
I'm sorry.
She had specified she had been drinking liquor. She never specified what type or anything like that.
And how about in talking with the Matthews, what did they tell you was going on with her?
They told us she had been drinking. That was no specifications.
Did she say liquor or wine or both, or do you remember?
She mentioned liquor.
any other drugs, marijuana, cocaine, anything?
No, we asked and she denied.
And did you see any evidence of Miss Ergish consuming any marijuana, cocaine, any other?
No, sir.
And when you talked to her about drinking, did she indicate how much she had to drink?
She said a lot.
Did Matthews make any statements to you as to how much she had to drink?
Not that I recall, sir.
You mentioned that Miss Ergish and yourself and the Raleigh Police Department contacted Miss Ergish's parents. At any point in speaking with Matthews or Miss Ergish, did they indicate that they being the Matthews, had contacted Miss Ergish's parents?
No, sir, because when we contacted Miss Ergish's parents, we were outside in the ambulance. I had to make an attempt on my phone and received no answer, so I actually used her cell phone to contact her mother.
Were there any signs of any alcohol containers that you saw when you were down in the basement taking care of Miss Ergish?
No, sir, not that I saw.
You mentioned an odor about her earlier, an odor of alcohol. Did it remain constant throughout your entire interaction with her?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Yes, sir.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Walters.
Good afternoon, sir.
On that particular evening, what time was your shift?
24-hour shifts at that time is what we were working.
So had you just come on at that time?
No, sir, I had come on at 8 o'clock the morning before.
The morning before, so you'd had a very long...
Don't remember how many calls were in that day, sir.
Okay. Were you involved in the call on Hunting Ridge Road that came out about 10:37?
No, sir.
Okay. Were you aware of it?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you become aware of it at some time?
I believe after the call I did.
Okay. Talking about after the call,
Yes.
the one you responded to on Vance Street?
Yes.
So you learned that there was a fatality on Hunting Ridge Road?
Yes.
And did you learn that there was a young man that was that had supposedly come from that residence to?
Not at that time, sir.
Did you learn that at some time?
I believe it was probably within a day or so after.
Okay. And did you learn that it was the son of a state trooper?
Yes, sir, I did.
That's all the question I have. Thank you.
Redirect.
May I approach the witness room?
You may.
Yes, sir.
Reapproach. In looking at that document, what time did you clear the scene, Mr. Walters?
0204, sir.
02, say that again.
0204?
So 2:04 a.m.
Yes, sir.
And so you were on scene there from 1:22 to 2:04 a.m.
Yes, sir.
Your diagnosis of Miss Ergish, what was that, or the symptoms? I guess she was
Objection.
exhibited?
think it's asking, answered, and beyond the scope, Your Honor.
According to its discretion will allow it, even though it may be beyond the scope of cross-examination. Objections overruled.
She presented of someone that was intoxicated.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. I don't have any further questions.
Further cross-examination?
Yeah, thank
You may step down, sir. Just leave that.
Yes, sir.
Next witness, please.
Thank you, Mark. If I may press the witness statement. At this time, the state would call Officer Pete Manukas to the stand.
Sir, if you would, please place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
There's a brief legal matter that might be best to hear outside the presence of the jury, just briefly. We can approach or
Well,
send them out this.
Approach to start with.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, you were just sworn, so you may begin with direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Manukas, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Will you please state your name for the record?
My name is Peter George Manukas.
Officer Manukas, how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed with the Raleigh Police Department.
How long have you been with the Raleigh Police Department?
I've been with the police department for 15 years.
Any prior law enforcement experience?
No, sir, I do not have any.
Okay, and any military experience?
No, sir.
Officer Manukas, if I may. In the Raleigh Police Department.
I'm currently assigned to the Special Operations Division working for the Crash Reconstruction Unit.
And Sergeant Sweet mentioned, the Crash Reconstruction Unit earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about what that unit does?
Our responsibilities on the Crash Reconstruction Unit is that we investigate all fatality vehicle collisions within the city of Raleigh, serious injury collisions that are life-altering, or officer-involved collisions that involve injury, or any other time that the command staff feels that they want a further investigation. That's what our job is.
How long have you been on the Crash Reconstruction Unit?
I've been on the Crash Reconstruction Unit approximately 4 years.
And during that 4 years, Officer Manukas, can you tell us about how many fatality crashes that you have investigated?
We average about 35 fatalities a year. So I would say approximately 150 fatality collisions.
And those fatality collisions, do they all involve alcohol, or can they involve other causes?
No, alcohol and several other causes stem from the investigations that we have.
Who else serves on that Crash Reconstruction Unit with you, sir?
There's two other officers, Officer Jamie Rigsby, Officer Chris Bradford, and our sergeant is Sergeant Hoolan.
Sergeant Hoolan, the gentleman seated behind me here in the courtroom.
That is correct.
Do you have to be selected to this position, Officer Manukas?
Yes, sir, we do.
And prior to being selected to this position, and since that position, taking that position, can you briefly describe kind of what training and experience you have regarding crash reconstruction?
I joined the police department in 2000, January 2nd of 2000. I started crash investigation specific training in approximately 2006, where I started going to several different classes, from the basic law enforcement class of how to investigate a basic wreck, at scene is what we call it, when there's a rear end collision, real minor damage, and how to fill out the basic DMV 349 form was the first basic class that we take. After that, I was selected by my department to attend several different trainings. Advanced reconstruction, which is more math intensive, physics intensive class that allows us to look at evidence of the scene and determine how the collision occurred, speeds of vehicles from different types of evidence. For example, if I lay down a skid mark or lock my wheels up and I strike a vehicle, we can measure the distance of that skid mark and come up with the original traveling speed for the vehicle. So different types of math problems like that to be able to construct or reconstruct a vehicle collision. After that, I was selected again to go to reconstruction school, which is to take all of this information that we've provided and be able to reconstruct a wreck. It's basically putting a puzzle back together. The advanced class was being able to gather all the pieces, and the reconstruction class is being able to put that puzzle back together to make something out of it. And that was our reconstruction, full reconstruction. I've been to several different specialized trainings on pedestrian crashes, bicycle crashes, motorcycle collisions, energy methods, different ways to how vehicles collide, how to get speeds based on energy lost. But to sum it up, I've gone to over 2,500 hours of just crash-specific training is what I've attended since I've joined the police department, just specifically classroom stuff.
And Officer Manukas, have you been tendered as an expert in the area of crash reconstruction?
I have.
Prior to today?
Yes, sir, I have.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask to tender Officer Manukas in the area of crash reconstruction.
The witness will be allowed to testify as an expert witness in the field of crash reconstruction.
Thank you. Officer Manukas, referring you back to June 28th of 2014 and to the early morning hours of June 29th, 2014, were you on duty sworn and so employed as a Raleigh police officer?
I was.
And on that date and time, sir, did you have the opportunity to investigate the crash involving Mr. J.T. Taylor?
Yes, sir, I did.
How did you become involved in that investigation, Officer Manukas?
I was the on-call investigator for the crash reconstruction unit that night and obtained a call about a single vehicle fatality collision.
You were at your residence at that time?
I was.
Did you respond to the scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
Where was the scene of the crash?
The scene of the crash was at the 1400 block of Hunting Ridge Road.
And whereabouts in Raleigh is that, sir, if you can kind of...
It's considered North Raleigh. It's off of Falls and Noose Road or Rainwater Drive. It's kind of right in between the two, near Litchford Road and Durant Road.
Excuse me. What time did you arrive there at the scene, sir?
I'm not sure the exact time that I arrived. I received the call at approximately 10:30 or 10:45 in the evening. It took me approximately a half hour, 40 minutes to respond from my residence.
What did the scene look like when you arrived?
When I first arrived, the first thing I noticed was obviously the crime scene tape on by Lone Pine, I believe the name of the road is, north of the crash scene. So I parked the vehicle and walked down to the actual scene.
What was the weather like that night?
It was not raining. It was dark, obviously. I remember it being a little bit muggy out and warm.
But not raining, nothing unusual about the weather for a June 28th night?
No, sir.
How did you begin your investigation? Who did you speak with?
I first spoke with Sergeant Sweden, who was the sergeant on the scene. The first thing we did is kind of just walk down to the vehicle, which was a white BMW that had extensive damage to the front and driver's side of the vehicle. And then we walked past the vehicle and looked at the debris field and kind of just a quick overview of the scene.
What did that debris field look like?
The best way that I could describe it is there was debris spread from the houses on the east side of the block and to the houses on the west side. There was debris everywhere.
What did you do at that point?
At that point, I started gathering information and started the investigation into what actually occurred.
And you mentioned it in kind of introducing yourself that speed is one thing that you look for in these types of crashes. Did you go about gathering information that would help you at a later point determine at what speed Mr. Taylor's vehicle was traveling?
I did.
What did you have to do out there to do that?
Well, the first thing that caught my eye was the damage to the vehicle. It was extensive damage. I'm familiar with the roadway, and I knew that the speed limit was in a residential area. I knew that it was 30 miles an hour. Just observing the vehicle in the area of debris, I knew that the vehicle had to be traveling at a high rate of speed when the crash occurred. Some other things that we look for is tire marks. In this case, we were able to locate some tire marks prior to the vehicle running off the roadway, and then there were also tire marks off the roadway before the vehicle had struck a tree.
And is that what you did out there that night, Officer Manukas, in terms of gathering information, was looking at road marks and debris field and so forth?
We did to help establish the speed of the vehicle.
The second prong, and one thing you kind of mentioned before, is that you look at alcohol in terms of what causation of these types of crashes. Did you take any steps that night to investigate the matter in terms of if alcohol played a role?
Personally, I did not, but what we do, in this case, the first priority that I had when I got to the scene was the identification of the driver of the vehicle. He had yet to be identified when I arrived, so that was my first responsibility, is to identify the driver of the vehicle, and then look at causation right after that.
And were you able to identify the driver?
I was.
Who was the driver of the vehicle?
Jonathan Gregory Taylor.
And did you identify, or did you speak with the parents of Jonathan Taylor that night?
I did.
As Sergeant Swede described earlier, you and him the ones that gave the death notification.
We did.
How else did you proceed in your investigation that night?
I called CCBI, who is City County Bureau of Investigation, to the scene. They photographed all our traffic fatalities for us. And then I took measurements and marked the scene to tire marks and evidence that we would need later.
So that night, did you get the entirety of the information that you needed in terms of how to form an opinion as to the speed of that vehicle and kind of the cause of the crash itself in regards to the vehicle in motion portion of it?
Partially, yes. What we do when we get to the scene, and as you could say, this was very hectic to be at the scene with the family of the deceased at the scene as well. So what we did is took some quick measurements, and honestly, I have a calculator that I carry with me, and I did some quick math to kind of get an estimate of speed. I did come up with an estimate, a low estimate of speed, just based on the evidence quickly. And what we normally do at night, we'll come back during the day and reevaluate the scene as a unit and try to narrow down the scope a little bit to make sure we did not miss anything.
Did you do that in this case?
We did.
When did you go back out to the scene?
On July 2nd. So the wreck happened on the 28th of June. On July 2nd, myself, Officer Rigsby, and Officer Bradford returned to the scene.
And did you take further measurements at that time?
We did.
And anything different about those measurements than the measurements you took the night of the 29th, or the morning of the 29th?
We were able to narrow down the speed a little bit more by getting a little bit better measurement of what we call a yaw mark from the vehicle, which can give us a more accurate speed.
Officer Manukas, after taking the measurements and applying the skills that you learned at the reconstruction classes, were you able to form an opinion as to the speed that Mr. Taylor's vehicle was traveling that night when it crashed?
I did.
What was that opinion, sir?
My opinion was that he was traveling at approximately 89 miles an hour when he first left the roadway. His vehicle hits a culvert or a sewer grate. It continues to travel for over 100, I believe it was 127 feet until it struck a tree. So we got his original traveling speed at approximately 89 miles an hour, and then his speed at impact with the tree at approximately 63 miles an hour.
Mayor Pro Tem Witness.
You may.
You want to review the photographs first? Officer Manukas, I'm going to hand you what has been identified or marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 50 through States Exhibit 57. If you'll take a look at those documents, tell me if you just kind of flip through them to start with. You don't have to identify each one. Tell me if those are the photographs from the scene that night.
Yes, sir, they are.
Any changes or alterations to those photographs, Officer Manukas?
No, sir.
They fairly and accurately represent the scene as you found it the morning of January 29th, 2014.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to introduce States Exhibits 50 through 57 for illustrative purposes.
States Exhibits 50 through 57 are admitted into evidence.
Thank you. And permission to publish those photographs to the members of the jury.
You may do so.
Officer Manukas, I'm going to start with States Exhibit 50, and that is our 2446548. If you can identify what you see, that may actually be 51. We can start with 51. That's fine.
This is one of the points in the trial which I'll ask you to step from the courtroom while I take up matters in your absence. Please remember to follow my instructions. Step out of the courtroom, please. We're in the absence of the jury. The state had previously indicated to the defense and shown to the court States Exhibits 50 through 57 as photographs to be offered and introduced into evidence, and they were offered and introduced into evidence. And then in the beginning of displaying, or an attempt to display, a States Exhibit that had been identified and admitted into evidence, it appeared to the court that for a brief instant that a photograph that had not been identified and had not been admitted into evidence was displayed on the projection screen in the courtroom, and it appeared to be a photograph of a body of a person. Have I constructed for the record what happened?
You have, Your Honor. I would like to be heard
Right.
at the appropriate
All
time.
right. I just want to be sure what's on the record is what took place.
Well, and I think Your Honor, I would like to place a little more description about what was in the actual photograph itself for the record. Or if Your Honor can, if you want, but I would.
Well, you may have looked at it more than I did. Okay. I'll be glad for you to state what you contend, and I'll let you state the same.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Go ahead.
thank you, Your Honor. And obviously what I saw, Your Honor, was the body of J.T. Taylor seated in the vehicle, deceased, with blood, and it was a very disturbing and frightening picture that evoked a reaction from the audience, which I don't know who reacted, but there was an emotional reaction in the audience, Your Honor, that was out loud and could clearly be heard by the jury. And in light of what I contend the picture showed, that I don't believe I have any other choice but to move for a mistrial, Your Honor. That was a very disturbing photo.
Before I hear arguments in response to the motion mistrial, if you'd like to state what took place for the record, your version of it or your thoughts about it.
Your Honor, the photograph was displayed, and I will tell Your Honor, and I think Mr. Miles and I and Your Honor took great care to go through the photos that were admitted beforehand. It was an error. That photograph was up there for, I think, less than 3 seconds. It was displayed. There were multiple photographs taken during this incident. We've taken great care to try and just use the numbers that are identified on the back of our photographs. There was nothing intentional whatsoever to show that photograph. There are hundreds of numbers that we've gone through, and we've tried to do the best we can to bring up the right picture. The applicability to these charges, I think that limiting instruction can cure the error. Again, it was not up there long at all and was taken down immediately.
Any argument in support of your motion for mistrial?
Well, Your Honor, obviously, as Mr. Walters stated, we were very conscious of the situation with the photographs, and that's why we approached, and that's why we went through them with Your Honor, and because we know how sensitive it is, and we know that there's case law out there as far as the prejudicial effect of these pictures, and of course, in addition to that, the probative value of these pictures just in general of the wreck scene with what my clients are charged with was marginal anyway. And so in the totality of the circumstances, Your Honor, I don't understand, I don't see how we can unring that bell with what we saw.
I'll meet with the lawyers in chambers for a few minutes, and please bring the subject photograph with you. Meet with me in chambers right now. Court will be at ease. You may step down until we reconvene.
Thank you, sir.